We now call the meeting back to order. At this point in time, we have just gone through one of the first amendments in the CIB budget. At this point in time, we are open to additional comments, amendments, questions. Councilwoman Hiller, the floor is yours.
All right, well, obviously some fundamentals have changed so that the packet that I brought that has some text in it is a little outdated already. But I think that what we can do is still run through the suggestions that I had for, it's a combination of items that would be funded with cash and could be reasonably, I believe, and I'll tell you how. Ones that could simply be eliminated from the capital budget, and then some to push back into the 6 to 10 year bucket. Overall, as I mentioned earlier, my vision of what the 5 years that we look at ought to look like is that those are vetted projects that we're sure of and that we're ready to go. And that, of course, my approach to it was that the totals, even into the out years of years 4 and 5, would be within our policy limits.
Councilwoman Hiller, if you wouldn't mind, I have a council member that has a question for you.
Now, is this in addition to what we received from you and what we received from staff to response to this, or is this all new? You know what I'm saying?
I raised I had a list of suggestions in March. This is largely reflective of that list of suggestions.
Okay, so we have gotten this information with staff's input on it.
At this point, I can just go over the pieces. There may be some further thought that I've given. Each one is a standalone, of course, and then together they work together. Again, when I put this together, the goal was to get the whole thing to $9 million a year average. Obviously, at this point with the vote that just happened, we can still look at each of these projects as ways to relieve pressure on that budget, either to come in under 11 million a year anyway, and or to make room to move street projects up if that's what this body wants to do.
Yes.
Right? So, with that, I tried to make it simple. I don't know if I did, but when you see the grid in the middle of that handout, if you take this page from the budget, I think it's page 6 or whatever, then this is how those categories would change. Some of them don't change, and some of them do. I just thought that might be the easiest way to find projects. I have, when I put that together, I retained the Weir project and I retained the City Hall Phase 1 project. So obviously that changes the totals with the City Hall Phase 1 out. Reduces that whole net by 3 point whatever it is, 6 million. One of the things that I wanted to comment about the Weir project, there's strong support for that and because of the safety and so on. But we still have had conversations about why the cost went up so much. I am hopeful that we can continue, that we pass it, but can continue to look at whether there are some ways, perhaps, as I put it, finding somebody who doesn't work on the Mississippi or the Missouri River all the time instead of creeks and byways, and see if we can't get those dollars down and save some money. So that's just, I guess, a commentary on it. I don't feel like I'm in a position to suggest changing that number at this time if we think we might need it, but I sure hope we come in under it. Other than that, what I did was, when you add up the projects, there are about 5,075,000 that convert to cash. And what that is, I can go through them in detail, is 2 years worth of the street lights, street signal changeouts, which I would like to see turn to cash all the time, and then 3 of the 6 fire trucks that are in there. I don't think there's enough cash to find to convert them all, but as what I would like to see is a start toward converting those things that should be done cash annually, if we can do it, to start. It saves a substantial amount of money to convert just those 5. would save, I think I got my numbers here someplace, would save about $900,000 in interest and finance charges that we would pay if we did them and bonded them. Also included below are about $8.276 million in projects that are removed, and I'll go through those. And then $5.9 million moved to years 6 to 10. So, and that got the whole thing down to, at that point, only 2020 being over that $9 million. With the City Hall Phase 1 out, the whole system is below 27 million, just in terms of looking at it. The traffic signals, I proposed, back in March, taking them all out and figuring out how to do the first couple with debt service money and the rest of them through operating funds. At this point, I'm just proposing those first two would come out. When I had talked with city manager before, the idea was to take that $885,000 for each of those out of actually the dollars that I handed out to you that would be within that 21 million a year spending that we've been doing before in debt service. There's enough to do that and stay within that $21 million. The fire apparatus, there are two. Like I said, there's actually 6 in this grid. There are 2 $820,000 engines in 2021 that I would propose to convert to pay for with cash. Again, based on the timing of those conversions, there was enough money within the 21 million that we've been spending already to do that. And then the big aerial in 2023. 1.665. Convert that one to cash as well. So those were all the cash conversions. If somebody preferred just fire trucks, we could do 2 more $820,000 fire trucks instead of the 2 traffic signals. But the money is there. If in fact we can't use cash from the debt service fund to cover them because of the limitations that the city manager just said, we can adjust in the operating budget how much money is going into the debt service fund to fund them someplace else. The money is there. You want me to go run through these, or you want to stop me right now?
Councilwoman, Deputy Mayor?
It
Okay.
goes through all of it.
Okay.
Because I know I've got the city's responses. I don't know if you want to go one at a time or when you get finished, can we hear their response to you? So I just don't have one side of the story, but both. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know if you want to do it as you go along, like why? I mean,
let me address that on my side, and I think they've made their side clear. It's been very clear all along that the lead city staff really wants to bond things. They're comfortable with that. Even when that wasn't in the question, the answer was, well, we'd really prefer to bond things. That's troubling to me. It's troubling to get a grid like we got the other day that makes it look like we would make money off borrowing, which just never ever works. So I continued to look at them. I appreciated the challenge from the staff, but when you model it out and you don't use kind of the fancy present values and various things that can be done to demonstrate dollars, the money just, it doesn't work. For instance, the suggestion that we don't want to spend reserve money because we're making the interest off it, I don't think we can count on that long term. Councilman Jensen talked about that earlier. There's just not a tradition that you can count on that happening. Maybe if you wanted to estimate 2 years worth or something of the interest that would be lost, but not a lifetime of interest, it trades out. And the savings is far more than the interest. In terms of what to move to years 6 to 10, as I mentioned earlier, proposed to push off phases 2 and 3 of the City Hall program. It could be that we won't, depending on what we want to do with the front entrance to City Hall, that we won't even need $1 million of what was discussed in the proposal. It seems to me that we really need to get the planning done for the courthouse move and get that vetted if we do want to move the court, or if we want to do that community space or some other use for that space on the first floor. We need a little time to work on that. If in fact with this vote that just occurred, people want to move projects back from that 6 to 10 year bucket next year, I think people can, but I think right now phases 2 and 3 should be pushed out since they're not fully vetted. Also was proposing to move the hazmat vehicle out. My understanding is it appears we need an upgrade, but right now we have a trailer and the hazmat equipment gets pulled out very rarely. And so the idea of getting an $850,000 super truck versus exploring a little further whether we just need to replace the trailer and the rigging that goes with that, I think is worth consideration. So that would be a pushback to the 60-10. As I suggested back in March, I think we can safely roll back the neighborhood infrastructure, aka SORT program, to the 2018 level. That's a $300,000 a year change. We are at a point where we are doing so many other infrastructure projects in combination with the SORT program, or even ahead of it in our various neighborhoods, that I think if we're trying to trim the CIP and CIB budgets, that we can, I think the neighborhoods will be fine. My neighborhood in Central Park, for instance, just is coming up on SORT. All their streets were redone over the last 2 years and the sidewalks put in. Tennessee Town is a small neighborhood. They're going to spend the money for sure, but I think that the $300,000, and they're going to spend it well. There's some good things happening, but I think we can stay at that other level and work effectively in those neighborhoods. My proposal would be that Fire Station 14 comes out, and somehow in my typing I missed the delete part, but from all conversations I've been involved with, we're not likely to build that. We're working on a partnership for the way south, and so if we're not likely to build it, I don't see putting it in the 5-year priority plan. And last but not least, I appreciate the thought that went into putting $1 million in for us to spend, come up with some ideas to spend, but I don't think we need to do that at this time. So those were the proposals I wanted to bring forth.
So the only remark that I would say before we go into discussion is that I want us to be very cautious with regards to when we're talking about present value and net present value and future value of money. Those are not fancy calculations by staff. Those are legitimate numbers because what the formulas that it gives you, what the money is valued at tomorrow, is based on the interest and the time of that money and what it actually spends in. So what I don't want the public to take from this conversation is that those calculations are not valid. I don't want to invalidate the staff's assumptions with regards to what $1 today is going to be worth tomorrow and what an investment today is going to be worth tomorrow. Because I think that for individuals like us that have a background in finance, we talk a lot about the value of future value. When you put $4 million for a child in a bank account, it's going to be worth $1 million in the future when they retire. So that's a simple way of talking about the difference. I just don't want us to say it's just straight cut and our staff is putting in numbers and baking the numbers in a fashion that they're trying to convince us of something that is not accurate. When we talk about future value, present value, net present value, those are very, very, very important numbers. So, Deputy Mayor.
Well, like I don't want staff to have to come up here and say their side of why all this won't work, because they do have a side. One question I do have about the fire apparatuses, it said, this is safety feature critical. This isn't just because they want an apparatus. I mean, I don't see how we can move that and make them have equipment that isn't safe.
Not suggesting
Councilwoman Heller,
not
yes.
purchasing any of the apparatus. It's only where the money comes from. All the apparatus are in there. All the traffic lights are in there. All the street projects are in there.
Okay, what did you take out? You take out 14, and then what did you say about the hazmat?
Only that, I think we need to give it further consideration.
But who needs to? Who was the expert that told us, the expert on this, because I'm not, who told us that this needs done?
Well, it's one of the questions I followed up on with a question because I said, what are we doing now? And the answer was, we have a trailer.
Right.
And the trailer seems to, and that we use it rarely. But we, of course, apparently need our own to have it available in the case of an emergence, of a hazmat type emergency. I've heard further conversation actually from folks about how many people have hazmat materials and whether we all need to have our own. And so for me, that was kind of in the background, but the issue of whether we really needed the truck versus replacing and doing whatever we need to for all the equipment that we need on a trailer was worth considering.
So have some of your amendments changed from this April 2nd?
Again, I originally suggested that we convert all 5 years worth of traffic signals. This one today has just 2 of them.
And then on the traffic signals, it says, the mill levy would need to go approximately 3/4 of a mil in 2023 to accommodate this change.
And I felt like that was a really inappropriate response, actually. I did take the out year 3 out of there, but to say the mill levy would go up versus we're going to need X amount of money from from somewhere is, to me, more appropriate response.
And this isn't to be rude, but because I don't know, but do you have a degree in finance? I mean, and it's not to be rude, I just want to know. And I know you've worked in finance a lot.
I have. It's actually
I
part of my
appreciate
undergraduate degree,
Okay.
and so.
And that's okay.
Okay.
I just didn't know, because I know you're good at it, you do it all the time for us, for me, because I don't. So I just wanted to ask.
But it is not the advanced level, but I know how to look at it in terms of budgeting, and I appreciate the formulas for future values, but for the most part, we're living in the present, and in the next 5 years or so, even in the last 10 years since I've been on the council, you can look ahead, but realistically, things have gone up and they've gone down. Interest rates have gone up and down, so have those future values. The bidding has to do with what happens with the economy, and so using just a formula for that, I find myself more comfortable in just looking at what's the money, what's the cash, how much is it going to cost to borrow, how much does it cost, and what's the trade-off if you do cash. It takes some time to convert out of borrowing, even at the level we've been, if you really want to do more cash long-term. And it's a challenge that I've looked at for some time. And there's never a perfect time to do that. Mm-hmm. But when you look at how much you can save if you don't borrow on X, Y, or Z, that is an absolute value that we will save. Now, if we choose to borrow up to that same amount and do some other things, we don't necessarily capture it immediately, but it is a savings that makes a difference to our taxpayers and where their money is going and whether we have to ask them for more. And to me, whether it's done financially, as a lot of this discussion is right here, or whether it's done management-wise. One of the proposals that I made back in March was to review the the outstanding projects we had and see if we could sunset them. We did that 10 years ago, and we dropped a bunch of projects that had been funded but weren't moving. And the staff didn't even respond to that, and then didn't put it on the list of possible things. I asked about it again, but that's a way that you can save money. And so to suggest that it would be staff to implement that, but those are things that can be done to save money. And as I've said before, that's my only goal, is to get as much as we can done and save money at the same time.
So we have staff waiting to remark and Councilman Lesser that is also patiently waiting. So you would like to defer to Councilman Lesser? Councilman Lesser? Staff, please.
Madam Mayor, thank you. I was just coming back to the inappropriate comment. Certainly, staff never wants to be inappropriate or be perceived that way. But just to clarify that, what it did say was, absent any other changes, a 3/4 mil increase would be necessary. So it wasn't just a blanket statement that said a 3/4 mil increase would be necessary. It was absent any other changes. I think the second point that is worth making is that there isn't a staff side and a council side, and we certainly don't feel that way, or we don't want to feel that way. We're responding to questions. We're giving advice as to what we think are best financial practices and what makes sense. This is our best advice from our collective years of experience. And so we offer that in that spirit, not to contradict anyone or not to say we're right and you're wrong, but just simply to say this is, with our years of experience, this is what we think the best advice we can give you is. Thank you.
Councilman Lesser?
No, actually, Doug addressed kind of one of the things I was saying. There's not a staff side and there's not a council side. And while I don't necessarily agree with everything that Councilman Hiller is bringing forward here, I don't like the way that this is proceeding in regards to this. I think it's inappropriate to ask if she has a finance degree. We all were elected here. We all represent our constituents. And there isn't another side. If Councilman Clear, Deputy Mayor Clear has a question for a council staff, I think that's appropriate. But I think we need to get back on track here of how we're going to proceed with the amendments, if we're going to do them individually and all those, or if there's specific questions into what they are. But it's inappropriate to question motive and inappropriate to question that's all I have.
Okay, so we have right in front of us several lists, starting with the traffic signals. And if we would like to start, Councilwoman Hiller, individually by those amendments to vote them up or down.
Thank you, Mayor.
Do you want anything from us before that?
Does the council need anything from staff at this point in time? Any clarification from the document that you have in front of you? Any questions that you would like to ask staff before we move forward talking about the amendments? Councilman Emerson, to be followed by Councilman Jensen.
Thank you, Mayor. I went by this afternoon, and I'm going to kill your name, so I'm sorry, I'm not going to use it. Lemondoa, okay. And we talked quite a bit about this. And the one question I have, and I know we're probably not in total agreement on, I know you have some philosophies with debt and with interest earnings and stuff. I guess my question overall, I guess just being as, transparent as possible, is that, Councilmember Hiller did bring up a lot of ideas in that thing, and I know we can't do all of them, but I think, to the extent we can, I would like to the extent we can save money with some of them. And we talked about, I think what I heard staff say, and I don't know why, you guys can probably say this a lot better than me, but you don't want to get too constricted on our surplus right now. Right now we have a healthy surplus. You're worried about our bond rating and things, but how much room do we have? Because Councilmember Hiller is absolutely right. to the extent we can, move some of these things, especially reoccurring things. If every year we're spending $1 million on streetlights and, we're just doing that, that almost becomes a maintenance. That's almost an operational expense at that time if it's a reoccurring year. On some of the bigger things, fire, maybe not, but would there be a level of comfort that staff would support and say, we can't do all of them, but we'd be fine if you did these 3 or 4 or something like that? A lot to ask, but.
It is a lot to ask. So I think in terms of our reserves rather than our surplus, I think at this point, we're fairly comfortable when we speak to the rating agencies and just knowing what potential economic issues we could be facing, what the type of recovery would look like potentially. I think at the current reserve level, I think we're fairly comfortable. The discussion that I have had with the councilwoman is the idea of dipping into that reserves that we currently have. I am an advocate for not using those reserves. I am not, however, an advocate for debt, just to be clear. I was brought on to look at the entire financial picture for the city and be responsible for the entire financial picture. So when we're looking at the recommendations to utilize reserves to fund purchases for fire apparatus or signals, my concern there is that you are ultimately limiting your ability to respond in the event of a crisis. You are bringing additional concern, downward pressure from the rating agencies. And you know what, the rating is not everything, I understand that, but that rating does allow us to enter the bond market at a lower rate. So when we're looking at the idea of whether you use cash or not, that's not the concern on our part. That's not the driver based on the recommendations we give back. It's the idea of dipping into reserves, limiting what you can do in the event of a crisis. So I think these are great ideas. I think the idea of increasing your allocation, our allocation for PAYGO is certainly a good idea, but that needs to come out of the operating budget. And that needs to either come from an increase of revenue or a decrease of expense, because you need to be looking at a structurally balanced operation.
Yes, absolutely, sir.
Thank you for that. But I guess specifically, number-wise, right now we have what, and how much would you feel comfortable spending down? I mean,
At this point, I'm not comfortable in spending down the reserves.
$10, $15, $1 million.
I mean, $10 would obviously be
Okay.
a different discussion than $1 million.
Well, there you go. Okay, that's
But I don't anticipate the councilwoman wanting to spend only $10. But what I think is really interesting about this discussion is, really looking at your reserve balance, and that's something that, obviously as my tenure increases past 6.5 weeks, that I will consider. I think there's a real balance to be had of looking at the surplus in 2019, 2020. If we produce a surplus at the year end in the general fund, meaning our revenues exceed our expenditures, committing to the idea of using that surplus for one-time expenses. And the reason it's important to do one-time expenses is that you're not creating a structurally imbalanced situation. And that's frankly how the city got into the situation back 2008, 2009. So in terms of the comment, though, regarding the interest, because I think that is something that continues to go around the board and just have a lot of discussions on, the idea that if you were to use operating funds to pay for your fire apparatus, Councilwoman Hiller is absolutely correct. It would be less expensive to use cash than to pay for debt. But that was not the recommendation. The recommendation that we had before us is the idea to use reserves to pay for this one-time expense, this large capital expense. And the reason that concerns me is that after the first several years, if you look at, and I wasn't using present value, I was just simply using what interest you're going to pay out on debt versus the interest that I earn, the city earns on that $5.9 million. So if you just look at that, if you use reserves to buy the fire apparatus, you are basically eliminating the opportunity to earn interest in the out years. And that's where, if you refer to the memo from the 28th, I believe, March 28th, that's where those numbers come from. It's not present value calculation. It's not something complicated. It's saying if I spend $5 million today, in 10 years I can't earn interest off of that. But if I keep that $5 million in my fund balance, my reserves, which gives me the ability to react to an emergency, to offset another 2009 situation where you have 2 months to accommodate a significant decrease in sales tax. If I keep those reserves on an annual basis, we are currently projecting about $146,000 a year. And that's, I believe, 2.4%, but don't hold me to that. That's just what's in my mind right now. But I believe that's what it is based on. I think if you refer back to the memo, the number is there. So all expectation is that that will increase as well. But I think the idea of using cash on hand, meaning the surplus or building into your operations, is a great idea. And I think that's something that we should continue to consider in terms of increasing our pay-go allocation. But dipping into our reserves is really creating uncertainty in our overall financial position. And what I've gathered through my research here and just talking to people, we have only recently come to a position where we are comfortable and we are stable and we can respond in a crisis.
Thank you.
Councilman Jensen, to be followed by Councilman Lesser.
Thank you, Your Honor. So a couple of quick questions for you. I've been told repeatedly that we only need 15% in reserves. How much do we have today, and why are you of the opinion that if it's more than 15%, we should maintain what we have?
15% is a policy minimum. So I think in the event you saw a sales tax issue, you saw a significant economic downturn, you saw the bridge issue that we had recently, that's when you start to really bottom out at 15% because that's just the flexibility. In terms of overall what you are looking for, I think it really depends upon your revenue makeup. So we are somewhat dependent on sales tax, far more than some of our, if you're looking nationally, surrounding peers. We have a different expenditure base when you're looking at whether that is union increases, whether that's capital outlay. So in terms of the percentage that I would be comfortable at, I'm not prepared to offer that. What I have heard from the people that are here is that recently we have found stability and we've been able to work through our budget, have limited increases in the mill. So that's something I would be more than happy to work with the council on, to provide additional feedback on where we see the policy not as a minimum but as a target over the next, few months or 6 months, however the time frame that is set out.
And I would appreciate that if you don't mind, just because in all the conferences we've been to, there's this national standard of 15%. To me, I'm not a finance expert. That's some magical number that got pulled out of thin air that I don't understand. Why 15%? I'm not necessarily opposed to it if that's the number we should be at. I'm not opposed to being 20% or whatever it should be. I would just appreciate understanding more of why the percentage we chose is what we have chosen. And I think you make some compelling arguments for why it should be the number that it is. I would just appreciate a deeper understanding that at some point in the future, just so I'm more comfortable with that. My other question, quickly, I assume would be for you, Mr. City Manager, is on Ms. Hiller has recommended funding a number of things out of the debt service fund, and I would be interested as to, I know that's a policy, but why or why not that's a good idea, just for some clarification.
Sure. From our standpoint, we did some asking, actually, because of Jessica asking some additional questions. We verified today that we could not spend the money that's in the debt service fund directly on a purchase of an item. Now, you could sell a 2 or 3 year note and then repay it from the debt, from the additional monies that you have in your reserves. So you could do it in that format. So what we look at is the amount that cash is there to be able to pay bonds back.
Sure.
And allows you that if you wanted to go for it and sell more bonds than you typically would be able to finance on an annual basis, that money that's extra in that fund could then make that payment. That's what we saw if you looked at the 13 million per year model. That's what we were banking on, is that if you could go up to the 13 million because you would have that fund balance to be able to utilize to pay back debt. And so, now looking at 11 million or 33 million over a 3 year period, we probably would be less of that we would need to utilize in order to be able to pay that as the fund balance goes.
And so it's temp noting a mechanism that could be used to spend down that I know that's still technically bonding to some degree,
Yes.
but.
My understanding in speaking with bond counsel is that it would be correct.
Correct.
The state statute refers to, basically you have to retire all existing debt before you can access the reserves, which makes sense. You raise the mill for this purpose, but you'd be able to use it for temp notes.
So have you guys looked then, and you have to forgive me, that there's oodles of paperwork to go through to find specific answers to these, and I've slept since I've read all these. So have you looked at tip noting on some of these smaller projects as a way to leverage access to that, or has that just not been something that's a good idea at all?
If you wanted to utilize the reserves for that purpose, you would be able to legally do. That would be the policy question that you as a governing body would need to decide.
Well, I'm sorry, I just meant the debt service funds specifically, not, or is
Yes.
that what you guys are considering reserves?
That is all part of our reserve calculation.
Yeah.
Okay. I see, okay, thank you.
Councilman Lesser.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We talked briefly about it, it slipped by me, though, this evening. How did we say that the bridge repair, where did we say we were paying for that out of?
It's through existing funds with authorization within the half-cent sales tax levy.
Would
So-
that, thank you. I'm just curious if, you know, if that's not an event where we would go to our reserves to take care of something like that. I'm just curious what type of event would be.
I think it's consistent with the use of reserves if you didn't have an alternative funding mechanism. In this situation, we have the half-cent sales tax. And I genuinely think that our reserve level should be preserved. But you're correct. If we didn't have another funding source, it would be in a completely appropriate use of those funds.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Councilman Emerson.
I was under the impression we had a special liability fund, and what is that?
Special liability fund covers us when we have judgments against us related to court cases or settlements that we do in the course of a business.
And that cannot be used for things like that? Okay,
In the case of the, right.
thank you.
Councilwoman Keller.
A question along those lines. As I said earlier about related subject, it's all money. And so if we couldn't use the debt service fund for converting some of these projects into cash, the balance, it would be possible. I mean, what happens every year in the operating budget is that we are contributing money into the debt service fund in order to pay the debt. Right? I mean, there's money coming in to fund that fund every year.
It's two different levies. There are two different levies. There is a specific debt service levy and there's an operating budget levy. We right now designate how much our debt service levy will be and how much our operating levy will be.
But we control that, is my point.
Yes, we do.
So
But
if there was if we decided we wanted to convert some money that was going into the debt service fund in the past for the cash uses, we have the power to do that. I mean, I understand the staff's reticence on that. I didn't know, I wouldn't have typed this if I had been advised that, you know, we couldn't go directly into the debt service fund. But anyway, there'd be a way to move money around if we chose to.
If the governing body decided that the use of reserves was the most prudent step, then certainly we would figure that out.
And I also wanted to comment, I think that we only went from a 10% reserve to the 15 at that same late 2016 date that was cited when we updated all of our financial models. And so that's a fairly new figure for us, and I'm not arguing it, but we were 10 for a long, long time, and then in the early 2010 and so on, even dipped under that. So is there a thought on your part? I mean, the reserve is set so that it's there for that cushion. So it's nice always to have a cushion over that cushion. But is there a rule of thumb, or?
Well, as we discussed, I would be more than happy to work with the governing body at the direction of the city manager to determine what we believe based on our overall risk profile and our peers, what that would look like in terms of our reserve level. But I will say that the idea of reducing it to 10% would be inconsistent with our current rating category.
Can I ask a question to Mr. Gerber? Because I'm trying to make sure that I have memory of this. Prior to us having the 15%, our bond ratings were not great. And one of the reasons that we took the initiative to increase it to a 15% was because it made a significant difference in our borrowing ability and decreasing our cost of borrowing.
Mayor, that's correct. When I arrived here in Jessica's position, actually in 5 years and 1 week ago today,
Not that you can.
not that I'm counting, my charge was
6 hours and 15 minutes.
my charge was to help fix our finances because
Correct.
we were at abysmally low levels. And we were very aggressive with that, and we hit 15, and then we wanted to keep pushing. And part of the reason behind that, part of the rationale, is every bond rating call I've ever sat on with the city, since we've been able to make those changes, we are praised for our financial management. And it's in large part because of the good policies we've put in place, but also because we've been able to raise our reserve levels to a level that's consistent with other cities in the region.
Thank you. Okay.
I just want one point of clarity for the hazmat vehicle, we reach out to the different departments and ask for their feedback in terms of the questions we receive. So I just wanted to read that response that we received. So the hazmat vehicle replacement continues to be important. Currently, the hazmat response unit is a fifth wheel, 32-foot cargo trailer pulled by a 5-ton pickup truck. The goal of this project is to replace these two pieces of equipment with one vehicle that is more conducive to the needs of the hazmat response team as it pertains to safety and storage capabilities. So I don't think it's just that, there's two pieces, we want to move forward. I think it sounds like there's a safety aspect to it as well.
Okay. Councilwoman Hiller.
All right. Well, let's start, we'll just keep it to the items at the bottom of the page. Make the motion that we would take the traffic signal from 2020 and 2021 and fund them with cash. Obviously, the debt service fund directly is not a resource that would work, but we can.
Is there a second for that motion? We have a second. Additional questions? Seeing none, the first amendment that we have in front of us to vote on is on your document, the first line that says traffic signals, and it is a requirement to pay those with cash. So at this point in time, if there's no further questions on this amendment, I'm making sure that I'm looking at everybody. Councilman Jensen?
So given that we can't use debt service funds, Councilwoman Hiller, how would you propose paying for it then?
That's a really good question. Thank you for bailing me out here. I don't want to bond them at all, but if what I understand is that at this point, if we temp noted them for a year, they could be paid for out of that fund. I'm comfortable with how to say it, fund them with cash or one-year temp notes. That would give some flexibility to the choices. Is that okay?
Councilman Jensen, to be followed by Councilman Emerson.
So, given that we're still essentially bonding them, why would we need to make a motion to change that? Because they would still be in the CIP and run through the existing financing mechanism.
The whisper that I got in my ear was to say temporary financing instead of GO bonds. They're in the GO bond line item at this point.
So I would then wonder if we should just take all of these in a lot and change GO bonding to temporary financing, because that essentially would be what we're doing with every one of them.
There are only two of them that I am proposing to change the financing in, and that would be the first two, the traffic signals and the 3 fire apparatus. So I think the motion would probably best be that we would fund them with cash or temporary financing.
I would agree. I mean, lump ones, we're changing the financing mechanism together.
I don't know if people have a different feeling about traffic signals or fire trucks.
Let's take them one at a time, if it would be okay, just so that we can keep it clean. Councilman Emerson? Okay. Seeing no additional questions? Yes, Councilman, City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. This, the final, what she's proposing, make sure you understand, is that eventually it would be the utilization of reserves.
Yes.
Because we would temp note it if we decided temporary
And put the
financing,
reserve.
and then pay it back in the next year with the reserves, because we wouldn't sell a long-term note in order to accomplish it.
Councilman Emerson.
And I guess I just add, with the surplus that staff is going to generate for next year's budget, you can pay them off. You're welcome, by the way.
Yes, thank you.
Councilwoman Hiller.
If I could point out on the grid that I handed out earlier, if you look in that middle column, if we reduce these items out, we'll be at 27 million for at least what's on the table right now. So if you look at that column in the middle, if we're spending what we're expecting now at the 21 million rate, against just the 21 million in that fund, there is enough, the 624,000 from 2019, and then the 1,694,000 in 2020 to pay for those and still leave the $6 to $8 million cushion that we have in that fund, if we chose to use the temp note.
But again, that is without moving any of the road projects that I know that council members are going to probably want to move up.
Absolutely,
Just making sure.
absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, even over on the 13 million side, there's money those first couple of years. It just starts to kick in when we've got the bubble coming up.
Okay, we proceed with voting.
Okay, we have 6 yes. We have Mayor, Councilmembers Clear, Padilla, and Jensen voting no.
6 having voting yes, the amendment passes. We now move on to the second amendment.
Thank you, Mayor. The next one would be to convert funding for 3 fire apparatus, 2 of them in 2021 and the aerial in 2023, to cash or temporary financing.
Do we have a motion? That was the motion. Do we have a second? We have a second. Do we have questions or comments with regards to this amendment?
And just to clarify that, they stay in this budget, they move to a different category on the page.
Okay, seeing no further questions, we proceed by voting.
The motion fails. We have 8 no, Hiller and Ms. Ortiz voting yes.
Okay, at this point in time, do we have any other amendments in the CIP budget? I think Councilman Mays may have one.
No?
Oh,
Yes, yes.
okay, my bad. I'm so sorry.
Thank you. The next one would be a motion to move City Hall Phases 2 and 3 to years 6 to 10.
Second.
Okay, we have a second. Additional comments or questions? Councilman Jensen.
So I'm not understanding how we would even do phase 2 and 3 without doing phase 1. So I would recommend,
Yeah.
I would amend it to drop them all together.
Correct.
Until phase 1 is approved and completed.
Councilman Emerson.
Mayor, clarification, I know we didn't approve the extra
That's right.
tonight, but we're still spending like almost 9 million on City Hall.
That's
So
right.
isn't that going to take care of most, I mean, might not be the finishes and stuff we envisioned, but won't that be most of?
City Manager.
If I could clarify a suggestion, that based on the decision you made first and the idea of removing phase 2 and 3, I would say that you need to actually make a motion that removes phase 1, 2, and 3 from the budget in order to cover that. And then at some point, staff will determine when it goes back into the budget in order to move, because you need to make, even though you voted earlier, this number for phase 1 is still included in the budget, and so I would recommend that you make the motion to move phase 1, 2, and 3, and we'll address it at a future
So is
date.
that a friendly amendment, Councilwoman Hiller, that you would accept?
if I can float a little bit, I think Councilman Emerson made a good point in that if what happened tonight is that this council did not vote for the extra money for phase one, but there's still going to be $8.2 million spent on phase one, and if they are logically going to follow the updated plan to do that, then phases 2 and 3 still are in the running.
Let me
No, City
clarify
Manager.
that. Based on the decision that you made, we do not have the funds available to do phase one.
Okay.
So phase one, as it is designed, will not happen. We will do some things to the building, and staff will get together to determine what needs to be done, what is still within the scope that could be done without opening the whole project. We will fix those items that need to be fixed with the authorization that we have, and then we'll move on from there. But it will not be the entire phase one. We do not have the funds available to do that.
So at least for the time being, then, it would be best to simply remove phases 1, 2, and 3.
Correct. So would you accept that friendly amendment?
Sure.
Okay, so we have Councilman Emerson, you were the second. Do you accept the friendly amendment of removing 1, 2, and 3 from the budget for the City Hall renovation?
Yes, I do.
The phases? Okay. So at this point in time, the amendment that we have in front of us is the removal of the phases 1, 2, and 3 from the presented budget. We already said no to the phase 1, and this would just remove them so the staff could bring them back later. Councilman Mays.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a point of clarification. So when we remove phase 1, I mean, but we're still leaving eight and some change million dollars in there. Are we just are we going to call it something different? Or, I mean, are we just taking that $8 million and, I mean, because some of that money's already been spent.
Yeah.
Correct.
So I guess I'm just confused on exactly what we're doing here.
Just with the authorized 8.2 million, we have parts of the project that we'll be able to start and finish without affecting the overall. If we were to look at doing work related to running the chases for some of the heating and cooling systems and so forth, that ends up causing damage that occurs that has to be repaired, and so there isn't funds to be able to go ahead and do the renovations as they were proposed. And I see Dr. Peak moved forward. He can explain it a lot better with regards to what that impact is and what we would potentially be looking. So I'll turn it over to him and let him clarify what I started.
Sure, governing body, as you recall, what we talked about with you on the City Hall renovation project is right up front, we had about $1.7 million to replace the chiller and the cooling towers that was not included in that original $8.2 million. And that money has already been spent. We have design expenses for what we had proposed for phase 1 that have already been done. We had some emergency repairs. So the remaining budget available in the CIP project is not sufficient to complete the project. So what we will do is retool within that budget available and accomplish what we can with the remaining dollars. But more than likely, it will be repair the masonry, looking at the roof and replacing that. But outside of that, it would probably not include anything within the interior because we don't want to spend money on fixing systems if we can't put back the building the way it needs to be put back. And so that's where we are with the City Hall project.
So, but this particular motion is not going to inhibit you from being able to do that, is it?
So we had prior authorization for $8.2 million in last year's CIP, and that's the budget authority we would be operating under for the current project.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Jensen.
So quick follow-up, will you be able to leverage the, not tax, yes,
The
it's
tax
not, thank you.
credits.
It's getting late. The historic tax credits to extend that budget a little farther?
Yeah, so we can apply for, like I said, tax credits on the work that has been complete. So that will add some budget dollars to the project. But like I said, that alone is not sufficient to
Sure.
complete the project.
That will give you some additional buffer for contingencies.
Yes.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay. Seeing no further questions, we proceed by voting.
We have 10 yes.
10 having voting yes, the motion passes. Councilwoman Hiller, your next amendment?
Next amendment is the hazmat vehicle proposal to, it is in 2023 right now, so it's in an out year already. Proposal to move that out to years 6 to 10 for further consideration.
Do we have a second?
I'll second for sake of discussion.
Okay, second by Councilwoman Ortiz. Discussion, Councilwoman Ortiz, I take it that you have comments.
I have a lot of comments. You know, I don't know if you guys really understand what this hazmat does, but it's very important. We just had a spill at Adams and Branner that our hazmat team had to go out there with this little bitty trailer that's really outdated. I think this says 20 years. No, we don't have those kind of spills all the time, but we get called on statewide to come and help, and we do a lot of educational stuff as well, and I think this is very, very important that we just leave it where it's at. I'd like to see it bumped up, really, after what happened at Adams and Branner. You know, I remember I went out there and I looked at it, and it's, I'm very proud that we have a hazmat team. And I asked if I could put one of those little hazmat jackets on, and they told me no, because they cost $800 just to put them on. Their equipment is very expensive, but we have to have it. And also, you know, when you look at how long they were out there, I think it was 24 hours, is that right, Chief? 12? I just know they shut down everybody on I-70, and they were coming through my neighborhood that they didn't know how to drive. But anyway, that's a different story. I think it's just very important, and I'd like to see it moved up if there's any way, shape, or form, but it's something that we need. I think it's something that we should be proud of, that we're training, and it's statewide, and we should be very proud that we have that readily available to us. Thank you.
Councilwoman Hiller.
I would simply reply that obviously we need to, if it needs to be renewed, then we need to do that. I think we need to not be afraid, as we're watching our dollars and so on, to check and see who else has the hazmat equipment. Do we really all need our own? You know, does the Highway Patrol have one, and the Sheriff's Department have one, and the Guard have one, and do we need 4 different sets? And I don't know the answer to that question, okay? But, and then similarly, if based on how often it's used, if we have a trailer that's well-equipped and secured, when it's not in use, if that's good enough versus an $850,000 truck, it's just worth looking into, in my view, not failing to make sure we're covered.
Councilwoman Padilla.
I would just ask, as long as the chief is here, to ask him if he knows the answers to the questions that Councilwoman Hiller just posed.
City Manager, would you call the chief?
Chief Duke, if you would please come forward, talk about the hazmat vehicle, please.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. The hazmat team, we are part of a statewide response capability. We have a certain part of the state that we respond to. What's great about having it here in Topeka is the fact that we have a major rail line going through that hazardous materials go through every day. 2 major highways, you know, coming up from the south and the east and west of hazardous materials being pushed through our city, and actually coming very close to downtown the way I-70 is. And the hazmat call out here on Adams was something that we really were lucky that we had a hazmat team there. It was pure ethanol, which is highly explosive. And, excuse me, our hazmat team was actually training at our training center when that call came in, and they got there quickly and were able to mitigate it to stop it getting any of the product getting into the Shunga Creek, and the materials that we use, the absorb all, the suits and everything, the state will replace them for us because we're part of the state team. So those costs are replenished back to us when we use them. The deal about the hazmat trailer in the vehicle, if that vehicle, it is an older trailer, 20 years or whatever they've been using it, but they've got nowhere to change inside there. A hazmat vehicle has spaces for them to change into the hazmat suit no matter what type of weather. Then also we'll be able to have Wi-Fi inside there so they can get on the computers and start looking at the details about the type of products and how do you approach it. So there's a lot to it more than just a trailer and a vehicle. If that truck breaks down, then we've got no way to pull the hazmat stuff because that's an older vehicle as well. So it's older. It's not conducive for what we want to do to go throughout the state. We're having to pull, not everybody can drive a trailer. You know what it's like if you work on a farm or anything. Not everybody's trained to drive a trailer, but having a vehicle that's conducive to respond statewide and in the city is something that we do need.
Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, thanks for that. I did have a follow-up. I'm hearing a lot of things, it's regional and state and everything, and they help pay for it. I mean, the vehicle, can we get state money for this vehicle? Or I just hate to see our taxpayers on the hook for this whole thing if it's kind of a regional thing.
We need it for Topeka because of the situation we're in, surrounded by the highways and the railroad lines. It's an insurance policy, basically, that we have it here in case anything happens in this city. Yes, hazmat response is few and far between, but we've really had quite a number of hazmat calls this past year. We've had the incidents up on 75 where chemicals were killing small animals up there, and we actually had the KBI out looking to find out where these vehicles were coming from that were dumping the product. You know, so we respond inside the county as well for our county partners, the county fire departments, and like I say, the state will replenish anything that we use. Just like if we are a state asset, they call us out, they will reimburse for time out for the people working on it, plus any equipment that we use.
Okay, thank you for that. I guess, though, back to my question, though, sounds like a lot of people let us help them, but not a lot of people want to help pay for it. Is that correct? I mean, I'd love for the state to pay $400,000 of this.
Well, no, when UASC used to be around, the Urban Area Security Initiative, all that money is gone, and, you know, pushing for a grant to pay for something like that, it's a gamble whether you get it or not. But we're at the point right now that we do need a newer vehicle.
Thank you.
Councilman Padilla.
Thank you, Chief. Just as a follow-up, and you said a couple of examples like the one on I-70 over there by Brenner. Had we not had our own hazmat response team and vehicles, who would have been the closest and most ready to respond to that hazmat incident? Would it be the National Guard or who? How long would it take somebody else to respond to that?
Manhattan and Kansas City, bringing them in, they have regional assets that they do their thing throughout the state as well, where they are a local asset in that community. But if there's a need outside of that community, that smaller communities don't have the means to respond, that's where they would go. With the CST and the 190th, the CST is part of the National Guard, and they're not there 24/7. They'd have to be called in to come in. I've trained with the CST in a multi-state regional exercise, and they have so many hours to respond to the base to pick up the equipment and then go to wherever they need to go. So worst case scenario, you know, if it was in Kansas City and they responded, it would take them 4 hours to get there.
Well, it seems like a long time to wait for some response to a hazmat situation. I've trained with some of the firefighters during my career, and I put on one of those suits, and it's pretty claustrophobic, and it's hard work, and it's important to have the up-to-date equipment when you need it. You can't ever anticipate when you will, but you have to have that when it's needed. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Councilman Emerson, you're squirming here.
Yeah. So my problem is, I have trucks and we have all that, we have a couple hazmat things. We're required to, we have insurance and we have all this stuff, like usually the people come out of Kansas City, if we've ever had a spill, an accident resulted in a spill, like I'm sure this tanker truck's paying back this, correct? They should.
That is being followed up on as we speak.
Okay.
Legal has been working with me that for us to have an ordinance to follow up on claims on that. And it's, with this being a larger incident, the state's going to get involved. Whatever we use and everything, they're going to give us the funds to pay back.
Yeah, and please know, I'm not criticizing you for helping there. I'm just saying, that was a private thing. They had insurance. They should be paying back the city and the state for that.
That's what we're hoping is going to go through legal, when it goes through legal. This is a big enough incident that's not going to be
Sure.
settled this year. It's going to be a few years out.
Sure. Thank you.
Councilman Lesser.
Well, a couple of questions. And among that regard, there are actually state filings that those entities have to make. And part of that state filing is that they have pollution coverage under their trucking policy. So I believe it's 750,000 or $1 million that they have to receive that filing. So there's certainly need to follow up. My question, though, is in the event that we do respond to assist someone in Emporia or St. Mary's or Osage City or what have you, are we, kind of to follow up on Councilman Emerson's question, are we billing those entities for our time, or is the state reimbursing us? How's that? I certainly want to pay our part, but I would certainly expect us to be.
Again, if we're called out by the state to respond to the likes of Osage or somewhere like that, St. Mary's, they are the ones that are going to reimburse us for any costs that we incur for responding to that incident. Just like when we did in the grass fires down south in Hutchinson and everything, we received funds back from the state to cover our expenses for responding there.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Chief, thank you for your comments. At this point, Councilwoman Hiller.
I just have to ask the city manager whether we've sold that big vehicle we were trying to sell from the police department.
It would not function for this.
Well, it seemed like it had room inside for people and whatever. Okay. I just
It's a
had to
different kind
ask.
of vehicle.
All right, we proceed by voting. A vote for this would eliminate this and move it further to years 6 and 10. A yes vote would move it further out. A no vote would keep it where it's at right now.
We have 9 no. Councilmember Hiller voting yes, so the motion fails.
The motion fails. Councilwoman Hiller, your next amendment.
The next one is to roll back the neighborhood infrastructure budget through all 5 years to the 2018 level. So that would be 1.4 million a year.
Second. Vote.
Call the question.
Call the question.
Okay, question has been called. Nobody objects. Voting yes to this would mean that we would reduce. Yes, okay, Councilmember Mays.
I'd just like a little bit more understanding of this. Just, if you could give me like the 30-second summary of like why exactly, what is this for?
It's okay.
Do you want to answer? Maybe somebody from staff
I
wants to
can do it.
describe it.
I
City
can do it.
manager.
We decided as staff that based on the project costs that we had and how much we would be able to get done in a neighborhood at 1.4 million for this funding amount, we decided that it needed to be raised, or recommended that it be raised to 1.7, which was done by the council during the last budget. So the idea is that we're able to do more infrastructure projects in the neighborhood where a sort area is determined. And so that was why we made it, that's the reason for, it went from 1.4 to 1.7 in order to be able to do more projects in the neighborhood.
if I may, I think
Councilwoman Hiller, yes.
I think his question was, what do they do with it? It's mostly infrastructure. What happens is the neighborhoods bid for an opportunity to be in that program. Then they get planning assistance to prioritize a section of their neighborhood that they want to make a priority for this kind of intensive stages of resource targeting to target it in. And then it generally is infrastructure. So it might be alleys, sidewalks, streets, curb and gutter, that kind of thing. That used to be some park equipment, but that's pretty much phased out. So my point with that is that, of course, I support neighborhoods, but we have now upped what we're doing citywide in infrastructure in terms of the microservicing, we're getting caught up with our curb and gutter. We've got a whole pedestrian sidewalk program that was targeted at some of these neighborhoods anyway for sidewalks to school, so that we're investing enough that I felt like if we needed to trim what was in this budget to make it available for other things, that we would still be at $1.4 million plus some targeting on affordable housing, still making a quite a significant impact in these neighborhoods.
Deputy Mayor.
City Manager, this might be you, this might be Dr. Peak. What can we get for that extra money? I mean, how many sidewalks? I mean, I know it doesn't go far.
Jason?
Governing body, so, part of that coming to you last year and asking for that increase is because that level of funding has been static. And to say that we're caught up on infrastructure compared to the need out there for curb and gutter and sidewalks and all those things, I just think it is not accurate. So the reason for the increase is we got it. Tennessee Town's a great example. We're leveraging SORT funds to replace some of our utilities. And that came out of that neighborhood plan. And that's been a concerted effort with staff as we've looked at these SORT projects, is to make sure we do have a huge impact in the neighborhoods, SORT being a part of that, whether we bring sidewalk funds, pavement management, or other pieces to it. But it's the purchasing power of the dollar. I mean, that money has been static. The things that we need to do in the neighborhood cost more than they did when the program originated, so that's why we asked for the moderate increase to do it. Last point I'll say about the SORT program is ultimately the neighborhoods choose the project, so we don't have complete control of how, from a staff perspective, where those dollars go. And that got to how some projects get selected. We're building a bridge over in Quinton Heights Steel, which is an enhancement, and it's not addressing infrastructure. Central Park's a great example where we had the first round of the half-cent sales tax had identified that project as streets, so we came in and we did complete a lot of that. So in essence, by being successful, they have more dollars to do things in their neighborhood. But, you don't know which neighborhood's going to be in until the Citizens Advisory Committee selects the ones that have applied.
And if I'll add is, what I'm excited about this portion of the budget, and that the community gets a chance to vote on what they want to see done. It's participatory budget at its best. And you see all these leaders of the neighborhood improvement associations coming together, and they all agree on which parts of the city are going to get these funds and how those funds are going to be expended. So I just personally like these funds because it gives our people a chance to choose where they want to see the money invested. And having a little bit more will allow maybe for other neighborhoods I'm all for sidewalks. I want sidewalks everywhere. So this is one of those many ways that we could make that happen. So, City Manager.
And it is about improving the health of the neighborhood, and that's what it's there for, is to make efforts in order to be able to spend dollars and improve a neighborhood's health. Most of these are the neighborhoods that are the least on our health maps, and so that's where the money's invested into.
Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess a clarification, if I could ask Councilwoman Hiller. You just simply want to roll it back to where it was already, correct? You're not saying eliminate it.
Oh, no.
No.
No, it still would provide $1.4 million a year.
That's what I thought.
That we're reinvesting in our neighborhoods.
And I guess my question would be maybe for Dr. Peak, to the extent we give you those funds, instead of, putting them over here where they can only be used in a special place, you would then could do it more systematic and more strategic where it's needed, correct? If it wasn't attached to this.
I'm sure I understand the question.
So to the extent that we're using geo bonding to do this, that's going to reduce that extra we're going to give you to get the streets done here in a couple of years. That's a joke, by the way.
Yeah, that's, I guess, one perspective of looking at it. The issue from staff perspective, why we saw that increase is it's the purchasing power to do what the neighborhoods are asking to do, and that money is conditioned that portion has to be spent on public infrastructure. And so it's achieving that same goal of improving our infrastructure, but it's having the neighborhood participate in that decision-making process. So, I mean, that's why staff feels that that's important to keep it at that level.
But it goes to the neighborhood that wins the sort, right? Not necessarily to where it's needed, right? You might need sidewalks, for instance, on 29th Street on the south side.
So what I would say is the neighborhood is presented with the conditions of their infrastructure as part of that planning process, and planning does a really good job of talking about conditions, helping work with them to pick a target area where the return on investment of those dollars will have the greatest impact in increasing neighborhood health. And then out of that comes a list of very specific infrastructure projects, sidewalks, curb and gutter, streets, alleys, and like I said, we've also been able to do some utilities as well with that through those conversations with the neighborhood. And we just, from staff's perspective, is kind of the tone before. Our advice is that we think it's important that be increased, but if the governing body wanted to not do that and allocate it somewhere else, of course, we'll be responsive to that direction.
Sure, and just to clarify, I'm all for giving the money, the total amount. I just hate you guys to be handcuffed that you have maybe a greater need or, strategic need over here, but you have to spend it here. And that's my only thing. I would like to give you guys flexibility to use it where it's needed, not where, it has to be in this little area, for instance. So that's my only
Yeah, I
concern.
appreciate that. I think that's the beauty of the neighborhood process.
Sure, thank you.
Councilman Mays.
City Manager, Jason, one of you guys. For the SORT program, do we get matching HUD funds or anything like that? And by increasing this, if there is such a thing, would we be able to leverage that?
I think Sasha Hahn would be better to answer that, right?
So I guess what I'd say is this covers the infrastructure piece and the geo bonding, and the CDBG funds are budgeted within your federal funds part of the CIP.
So it wouldn't affect it then?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Jensen.
So just briefly, if this is infrastructure, why isn't this coming out of the half-cent sales tax instead of GO?
Councilman, I don't know the origins of the SORT and the geo bonding program, but in the 3 years I've been here, we've always had a SORT program. That program has evolved over the time I've been here. Like I said, it did allow for much more improvements within parks and park enhancements. So there was a variety of things. The council basically adopted a policy that kind of conditioned any spending in parks. I don't remember the specifics of that, but that program has changed over time. It used to allow for a lot more broader expenditures than just what we call our street or right-of-way infrastructure in SORT programs than it does today.
Okay, so the specific amount of money that's at play here is $1.5 million that's only allowable for infrastructure that's coming out of the CIP, which is generally geo bonds. So I guess I'm unsure why this was in there anyway then, and why it doesn't come out of the asset sales tax.
Because it's not just street funding.
Not all eligible.
If I may.
Councilwoman Heller.
I believe that the SORT program predated the first citywide half-cent sales tax. So it was an initiative of the council probably about 20 years ago now to do some targeted investment in the most at-risk neighborhoods. If somebody, I'm looking to see if somebody's been around longer than I have to be sure, but I think it predated Thank you.
So this is specifically limited to infrastructure, though, and SORT program is not.
I'm sorry?
This line item, as I read it.
That is the SORT program.
So, but it's only limited to infrastructure.
Yes, the SORT program is limited to infrastructure within the neighborhood that's designated.
My understanding was SORT did more than just infrastructure.
No.
It only doing infrastructure.
It does. You have another component that Sasha Hahn with Neighborhood Relations is a part of,
Okay.
and that is the CDBG money and the other, she has other parts that are done in coordination with the infrastructure. The GEO funding is for the infrastructure. And then she comes in with other monies in order to be able to do additional items in the neighborhood, in order to make it a holistic approach.
So we're only going to drop the amount of money we spend on streets, sidewalks, and infrastructure with this motion. Is that
Well,
what I'm understanding?
what we do is we go, yes, we would reduce how much we would have available to spend on those types of projects in the designated neighborhood.
Even though our whole focus is on streets, and infrastructure.
Well, again, they're matching up in some cases. In North Topeka East, there was half-cent sales tax and at one point trail money, safe routes to school, as well as SORT, as well as housing. I think that staff is doing I'd like to see more grants, but other than that, the staff is doing a good job at leveraging, in Tennessee Town, they're doing some infrastructure as well as some infill housing development. That was their priority, and so they're working with Cornerstone and Habitat to do new housing development. They're different in terms of how that whole package looks in each one.
And that's true, and forgive me, my understanding was the reason this was in there was it's hard to get grants for pavement.
Yeah.
And that's why we put this part in there to fix some of the infrastructure that we couldn't get a grant for. So I guess I'm uncomfortable lowering the part that we put in there to fix streets and sidewalks because we can't, and again, please correct me if I'm wrong, because we can't fund that with pretty much anything else with the exception of maybe half-cent sales tax. And if the goal is to transfer this to half-cent, then I'm interested in entertaining that, but, again, the whole focus is streets and sidewalks.
Councilwoman
If I
Heller.
may, and Dr. Peak talked about that, it's a much broader use for infrastructure than half-cent sales tax has.
Sure.
And I didn't intend to say when I introduced it at first that we were all caught up. We're not. But the fact that there have now been a series, in most cases, of investments in infrastructure in all of those targeted neighborhoods. So we're adding to that, but we also have concurrent program, more than we've ever had, concurrent programs going along at the same time.
Okay, Councilman May.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to go ahead and call the question on this one.
Okay, the motion fails. We have 7 no with Mayor Hiller, Ortiz, and Emerson voting yes.
Okay, Councilwoman, your next amendment.
There were 4 yeses?
3.
That's what I thought. Oh. Okay, the next one is fire station number 14. And for me, that's simply, let's not put something in unless we've got a plan and we're really prepared to do it. This has been, I don't know, for 15 years, just kind of floating along. My understanding is that city managers, we still are waiting for a fire plan. City manager's been talking about only 1-for-1 and definitely going ahead with Station 13. Any discussion I've heard in the last 5 years or more probably about Fire Station 14 is that we would not build it, but we would look at working out a partnership with a township or perhaps the Air Guard. This is the 14 is supposed to go way south near the industrial parks. And that it's not likely to be something we would do. And so at first I thought, well, we could just kick the can and push it off to years 6 to 10 like we have before. But it seemed to me that maybe we should just cancel it, and then when the fire plan comes out and we need something, we can start over, but that this is just not a project that anybody's seriously thinking about doing.
So, city manager, would it be okay for us to get staff to explain to us what their plans are for a master plan of all the stations, and if staff is in accordance with, if they have feedback on this amendment?
I can cover it, I think, enough for this evening. We will be having a discussion at the May 7th meeting with discussing the strategic plan for the fire department, talking about our plans for stationing for the next fire station. We will be looking at what our plans for implementation of ALS are and moving forward with providing you any information that you would request regarding that, clarifications, et cetera. So we'll be presenting that information. With regards to 14, it is an outside period of time before that would occur. So whether or not it needs to be in the 5-year plan, it's, we need to get 13 done before we can do 14, obviously. So if it is not in year 4, it's not as big of a deal, but also realize that in year 4, it's not authorized. And so we wouldn't be able to move forward with construction of it and in the position that it is in year 4. So if you put it in year 4, you put it in year 6, it's really ends up being the same result, and that no authorization occurs for the project.
Okay, thank you very much for the clarification. We have a second, right?
Well, I didn't make it into motion, so I will. I would move to, I don't know if there's any sense from the group before I make the motion about pushing it back or just canceling it. My inclination is to move to cancel it.
Is that a motion?
Sure.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion? Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you. I would hope my colleagues would look long and hard at this. I won't be supporting this. This is how things happen. This is what happened to your gauge, the street that you're pushing for. They took it out, now it's back again. And it was there. It was paid for and it was ready to be built. And we started swapping and it got taken out. This is so important, and I believe in the Mars contract that they said that they would finance so much of it. I'd have to pull that contract, but if my memory serves me right, and I'm getting old up here, and that's what's happened. We just push it back, take it out. We have got to sit down and buckle down and say, where we're going to have it. That's what happened to 13. We had the land, we had the property, and guess what? A new board come along, we didn't build on it. That was in the contract. We had so much time, we didn't build on it. Boom, we lost that property. And that's really, really sad. It was out there by Security Benefit and Life across the street from there, which that part of town is growing. So if anything, we can just do like we're doing now. We can move it back if we're not ready, but to take it out, I will not support that. I will not support that. And when we had this discussion with Mars, I want to say this, the partnership that we had, the fire station at the airport authority, they said, yeah, we'll partner with you, but our area comes first if we can get to it. Now, if we can't, then you guys are going to have to send a truck all the way out there. That's the kind of partnership that they wanted. That's not a good partnership because they have their little area that they're going to take care of. Mars, Bimbo, Target, they're all waiting for our station to be built out there for insurance reasons, I'm sure, for safety reasons. So I know a lot of the firefighters get on at the township only so they can try to get that experience to get on with for the city. So I just disagree. We've been having conversations ever since I got here. That's been 15 years ago in April, actually, on the 12th. I've been here 15 years. And we're still having conversations, and we're still having studies, and we're still doing this, and we're still doing that. We've got to buckle down, and we've got to figure it out. Thank you.
Okay. Council City Manager.
I will say that we do have mutual aid agreements related to things in that area in place. We know it's what we needed to do for the current situation. So we do have agreements with the National Guard related to response and also with the other neighboring township fire departments. So we have agreements in place for the short term till a decision finally is made, or over the long term, depending on what a decision is made. So we haven't forgotten, we do have those agreements in place.
Thank you.
All right. We proceed with the vote.
What is, can I have the clarification?
The vote would be to, if you vote yes, you are removing the fire station. If you vote no, you're keeping it where it's at right now.
We have 8 no, so the motion fails. We have Hiller and Clear voting yes.
All right, Councilwoman Hiller, your next amendment.
The last one is to, regarding the city manager's proposed $1 million budget for us to spend as we choose in 2023 is to thank him for his thoughts, but move to remove that.
Second.
Deputy Mayor?
City manager, where would that go? If we remove that, would it just go back into the general budget?
It would just be removed from the asking that would be done, so there would be $1 million of geo bonding that would then, I believe it's geo, I'm trying to remember.
Yep.
Yeah, it would be $1 million that would be available for a different project if we, with the cap where it would be established.
And what was the reason behind this?
Well, one of the things that we looked at was the different types of discussions that occur when we have these CIP meetings, and then the idea, wouldn't it be nice if we had money to do sidewalks or to fix this part of town, curb and gutter or streets or whatever. And so the idea being that if there could be an idea that was coalesced behind as a council to support a project, that this would provide the funding to pursue that. So that if, in other words, if the city staff hasn't created a budget that attacks all the areas that you want to see addressed, then this would provide you $1 million to determine, to address that area you felt was left out by staff as far as work that needed to be done in the community.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Hiller?
If I can point out in simple terms, you might note that this year in the proposal that we got totals $19.8 million when our cap was 9, and you all just voted to make it 11. So one of the drivers for me was to try and get these budgets to somewhere in the neighborhood of what we said we would spend, because to me that's responsible budgeting and responsible government. And so at this point, so I had taken the fire truck out, reduced the neighborhood infrastructure, taken the fire station out. All of that together, we had it down to 8.2 million. If we have now left the aerial truck, and we have left the fire station, it's not so much giving the money back. We're way over our annual or 3-year limit with that much money in 2023. And so I was looking at ways to simply roll it back so that when we ended up with a final budget, it was within the authority that we'd set for ourselves. So, you know, if we come up with, in conjunction with the city manager or amongst ourselves with some projects that we think we want to do, they can be developed as projects and put into the CIP next year. So it's not like that process couldn't happen or maybe shouldn't happen. We just didn't even have a use for it right now.
Councilman Jensen?
Thank you. I'm inclined to agree with Councilwoman Hiller for the next year or so. I would encourage everyone in the long run to keep the $1 million of council discretionary funding in there. You know, we talk about all the time of how we inject money into specific things. You know, perhaps this is a grant program for low-income youth. There's a whole lot of things that the council discusses that we want to do and emphasis we want to place when we do our strategic planning. But we've never actually had a funding mechanism to execute a lot of those ideas outside of the normal city budgets and that sort of thing. So I would encourage all of you in the long run to think about perhaps that's the funding mechanism for some of the initiatives that have come out of our strategic planning sessions and how they might be implemented in the future. In the immediate, next couple of years, I agree with Councilwoman Hiller in that we put a lot of initiatives in the CIP now, and it would be appropriate to plow that back in to try and lowering that amount. But, that won't always be the case.
Okay. Deputy Mayor.
I think, if I remember correctly, at the beginning of the meeting, we all agreed we didn't have the money to do what needed to be done. The streets, the fire station, we all agreed for that. And now to pick out, oh, let's just have fun with this and put it somewhere. I think we need to put it where it's needed. We don't need a placeholder of $1 million. Thank you.
Okay. We proceed by voting. Oh, Councilwoman Ortiz.
Hey, man.
A vote of yes would delete it.
Yes, okay.
Yes. And a vote of no keeps $1 million there so the council could decide what they want to do with it.
Can I use for personal use then?
No. It'd be great to use it for a housing trust fund.
We have 10 yes.
10 having voting yes, the motion passes. Councilman Mays, you may have an amendment.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So here we are again. History repeating. So Southwest Gauge from 37th to 45th is in terrible condition. You mentioned, what was the word you used, rubbleizing?
Yes.
Earlier.
Correct.
It's already pretty much rubbleized if we're going to be candid. It is a project that was supposed to get done, like you said, several years ago. It was removed. It was funded, but it was ultimately removed for purely political reasons and never added back on to the CIP. And so it is proposed 5 years out from now. There's absolutely no way it'll last that long. We've got crews out there. It seems like daily. I monitor my neighborhoods on the C-Click Fix app. There is a report on there, at least, it seems like twice a week for just that one stretch of road. And so I would move that, we move that project up to years 20 and 21. And move it from the city sales tax to the GO bonds. That also would free up approximately $2.5 million for something else in the half-cent sales tax to use in those years, so.
Do we have a second? We have a second by Councilman Lesser. Any questions? Councilwoman Hiller.
Well, if I could ask a question sort of across the table, I've noted that my colleague to my left has been penciling numbers. How are we doing on totals for 20 and 21?
Councilwoman Hiller, Madam Mayor, at this point, and Nick and I concur, we were trading numbers just a little bit ago. With your amendments, we're at 28,256, 28,256,000 for the 3-year.
So you're good.
So adding 2.5 million you would still be within the range that you adopted an hour and a half ago.
Awesome. Councilman Jensen.
Is that enough? Can you fix it with $2.5 million and not just fill it with asphalt, actually fix it so it won't fall apart again? Because I understand, correct me if I'm wrong,
The
this is
project budget.
like the third or fourth time we've fixed it.
Councilman, that's the budget that was proposed in the CIP. As it's moved up, I'm sure Jason and his staff will evaluate it more thoroughly, and after we get through the design phase, have a better understanding of what it actually might cost.
Councilman Mays.
Well, I'll speak to that. I've had quite a few conversations about it. It's a relatively simple stretch of roadway. I mean, it's a straight shot. They're not moving any utilities. It's basically, they're going to rip it out and replace it. It's, I think $2.5 million is probably, it might be even less than that. just have to see what the bids come back as,
I
right?
just want to make sure if we're going to fix it, we're going to fix it. That's my only.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you. City Manager, I thought we had a list of streets that are in their conditions. Where is this street at on that list?
I'll have to ask Jason Peak to come forward and answer as far as where it's in the proposal. But as the project is proposed, it is a fix completely, to answer Councilman Jensen's question.
What do you mean by completely? Does that mean?
Well, it's a
if they
remove
do-
and replace of the road, and so it is going to be a new road when it's completed.
So what if it needs anything under it?
We'll address the utility issues. I don't know that there are any from this. I'd have to cross-reference that, but I'll let Dr. Peak answer as far as this condition compared to other projects.
Yeah, we're not aware of any utility relocation needs with the current project. In the current forecast of right treatment at the right time, we had this road because it is one of our arterials and carries traffic in years 4 and 5 of the CIP. So it was within our 5-year window of looking at a replacement need on that. So this would just advance it forward in that process.
Well, okay, I guess because I know that we have a list. Where is this at the list? Is it in the middle? Is it closer to the top? You're saying 5 years out? So are you saying
So what did it say? It's closer to the top. I mean, if you.
closer to 5 years?
It's closer to needing replacement. That's why it's in the 5-year CIP. So it's a high, I guess what I'd say, it's a high priority from staff's perspective, I think is the question you're asking. It's an arterial road, it's in poor condition. The best treatment for it is, or best investment of dollars is to replace the pavement, reconstruct the road.
I have some streets like that.
So we have over 50% of our inventory of streets are in poor condition. And we've talked about that. $24 million a year does not fix all our streets. So this helps in the sense that if you're adding money in the GO bond, you're adding dollars, and so it does free up sales tax money to look at bringing other streets forward in years 4 and 5 of the sales tax program.
So is it going to free up 2 point whatever?
Yeah, it basically would, it would free up the money that's allocated within the sales tax program for other streets.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
Councilmember Heller, you might know the answer to this. When I came on the council and we were doing the CIP and we talked about all those streets that were on there and they were taken off because they'd been on there so long, kind of like you said, do you remember? And then we were going to put them back on because they were never done. What happened with that? Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Not the specific ones, but I think we ended up deferring to the staff had Stantec come and check all the streets again, and they re-rated them.
Okay.
And I think,
Right, and I guess just maybe to help add to the conversation, what we've talked about is get to a program focus with council. We understand you hear from your constituents, fix this street, and understand and respect that. From staff's perspective, it's about investing dollars in preventative maintenance, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. To move us from a 60 to a 70, we need to invest more dollars in reconstruction, right? And so that's what we would be looking to do probably with that sales tax dollars that you're freeing up, is identify another street that we could apply those reconstruction dollars to.
Okay. With that, we proceed with voting. A vote for yes would move up Councilman May's amendment. A vote for no would leave it where it's at right now in the calendar.
We have 10 yes.
10 having voted yes, the motion passes. Additional amendments.
She's my neighbor.
Councilwoman Heller.
thank you, Mayor. I don't have another amendment for right now, but I do want to make a proposal for people's consideration. It was mentioned earlier today that we had at one point considered a 3/4 cent citywide sales tax, and for a variety of reasons, decided that the best thing to do was to go forward with just a half cent for the streets. Some of that discussion was waiting a year or so and thinking about the other quarter cent for the streets, or for, again, some of the things that are taking our GO bond dollars. Sort of, my recollection of the example was Oklahoma City style, where you do what they call their penny tax, and those are often short-term rather than long-term, like our street taxes have been. And I wanted to suggest that we've been sitting on fire station number 13 for a long time, that we consider, even for the election in November of this year, floating a quarter cent sales tax to do fire station number 13. And quarter cent would probably get us about $7.5 million. Fire station 13 is roughly at about 5.6 million right now. And the plans are done, so it might not even cost us that much, as long as we find a site that we can use the plans on. That would leave some money to do additional sidewalks, was my thought. It could be anything else, about 1.9 million, it could be flexible. But if we did a 1 year, one-shot quarter cent sales tax to kind of test our market with the public on that, I think it would have great appeal and would be something that, again, would relieve our bonding. Because when we do the sales tax projects, at least here at the city, we typically have done them with cash. And again, a quarter cent would raise enough money to do that fire station in 1 year. So not to vote on right now, but I wanted to throw it out for consideration.
Thank you for your comments. Additional amendments or anything else? Seems like everybody is pretty satisfied with the current status. At this point in time, my question is, understanding what the changes have been, do we feel like we're ready to have a vote, up or down, so that we could put this to rest with the amendments? I see a hand going up.
So I think that should be directed to staff, if they're prepared to present final numbers, financing costs. If they're ready to give us a presentation on what we've just built, I'm interested in hearing it.
At this point in time, we have released money back to the community. And I think that the numbers that Mr. Gerber's, Councilwoman Hiller said, it was 28 instead of the...
No, why not?
Mayor, with the most recent addition, it brings us to $30,756,000.
Instead of 33.
So in direct answer to your question, I would suggest that we're comfortable with the understanding that we'll go back and really verify things tomorrow. We'd like the ordinance to reflect that. If we find a huge error, then we'll obviously come back to you, but if we find a $5,000 error, we'll adjust it.
I'm inclined, if you guys are comfortable being the experts, then I'm happy with that, so.
So we have a motion for approval of the CIP as amended. We have a second by Councilman Padilla. Councilwoman Hiller?
I do have a question as to what 2023 and 2024 are looking like in the GO, just so we know.
I see Nick
We're
getting
voting on
up.
this whole thing, not
No,
just
absolutely. I see Nick getting up.
the GO part of the CIB.
Mr. Hawkins?
So 2024, just to make sure I'm on the right, is 16,861,986. 2025 is 10,198,291.
I just want people to be aware of that. My preference would certainly be that we get those out years down to 9 million, if that's what we consider our budget cap. Also, we haven't talked about anything else in the whole CIP, which is pages and pages and pages. I'm not inclined to do any changes, but there are a number of utility projects on hold. That same concern about, looking at how we can do project management or finance management to get those costs down. Even what's in here requires us to raise utility rates again. And I just want us to be really conscientious as much as we can. That's just a side comment for the budget, not suggesting any specific changes at this point. I made my suggestions for reducing
Councilman
2023 and 24, so. I guess
Councilman
that's not-
Emerson.
Yeah, I guess my question is, I thought when we had the whole discussion about raising the thing, we were going to use whatever was left to accelerate streets. And it sounds like we haven't. I mean, we did accelerate the one project for Mr. Mays, but I thought we were going to actually use the rest, like I said, to accelerate as much as we could on streets. I may be wrong about that, but that's what I thought we were doing.
First, we had to do cuts, and the body didn't vote on enough cuts to leave much room. Remember, the staff was higher than 11 million to start with, so.
Right, but aren't we right now at 30, so we're like 3 million below that? And I guess my question is there a reason this has to be adopted tonight? Because it just seems kind of, to me, it kind of seems backwards that we tonight will pass this, and then you may come back on it'll be next month, and say this was wrong or this was wrong and we need to redo it. Is there a reason we need to do it tonight?
City Manager.
There is not a specific reason that we need to do it tonight. We have targeted this as being our night to approve. And we were hoping that through the process, we could get to a position where people would feel comfortable going ahead and voting. We've discussed it a number of times. I felt like there were a number of council members that if we could get to the position we already understood where we were at, that we would be able to consider voting tonight. And with being able to move this forward, staff's we're starting to get more into the operating budget.
Sure.
If we could put this, complete this, everyone being comfortable with where we're at with the numbers, then yes. So that was our desire.
Okay, again, my only thing was, if we have room in there over the next 3 years, and I heard Councilwoman Hiller talk about the out years now. Well, we have some things, but I think we have some things in there that are placeholders right now we don't necessarily know will happen. Again, to the extent we can do more sooner with the streets,
Right.
I'm for that.
Yes.
We do have additional funds. I mean, you mentioned that we're only at 30 million. Doug read the number. So we talked about 33 million being the amount that we would not go over. So as you look at that, we have a pretty robust year one. I think that as we go into next year's budget, my recommendation would be is to have staff target something that would address that 2,240,000 that is available, and put a project for you, take responses relative to that. But year one is pretty robust, so I think that if a project was going to be done, it would be done in the next year or the third year. And so we would have the funding available to do that. So I think leaving it at where we're at would probably be the best choice, and we'll identify a project and bring you a recommendation.
Fair enough, I'm ready to vote then if you guys are pretty confident in the numbers.
Okay. With that being said, we proceed with voting for the CIP with the amendments that we've made tonight. Okay.
We have 9 yes, with Ms. Hiller voting no.
9 having voting yes, the CIP is approved.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Councilman Jensen.
Given that it's 9:14 now, I would move to defer the next 2 action items and move to the non-action item, provided the 2 folks that have signed up for public comment are still here.
To do the revenue bonds.
We're going to run up against our 10 o'clock barrier.
We have.
City Manager?
I've been informed by staff that we need to finish these other 2 items relative to the approval of the bonds, and then also the approval of, was that and we have to go through the CID hearings, even though they'll be deferred. Action, we have to have the hearing and then defer. So we don't have the option. We've scheduled the hearings for this new date.
Are the 2 folks signed up here to speak for the non-action items? I mean, we've asked people to sit here a long time. That's not really fair to them, given that I realize these are important topics we've discussed, but
Very important.
We're going to put off to sit.
we've been sitting here a long time, so. Well, I'm waiting for answers to my questions.
So,
Councilmember Jensen, if I could, Mayor?
yes.
These last three should be pretty quick because the final
Yes.
two items on the CIDs, it will be just a continuation of the public hearing and a deferment of the.
Yeah, that's all it is.
He didn't know that.
Yeah.
All right, well, the last time we said it was going to be quick, it was 4 hours.
No,
so-
this will be. This will be, I promise.
All right.
Okay, City Clerk, if you could read the next item.
B is a resolution introduced by City Manager Brent Trout declaring the necessity to repair, alter, reconstruct, enlarge, or improve the city's water pollution, and/or stormwater utility system through improvement projects authorized by the resolution and providing notice of intention, authorizing the issuance of revenue bonds in the manner required by KSA 10-1201S.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the next step in the budget process. We have to begin the process in order to be able to issue the revenue bonds for us, in order to be able to start the processes for the various projects that are included within the budget. One reminder is it does take 7 votes to approve.
Okay.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Second by the Deputy Mayor.
Call the question.
We call the question. At this point in time, we would need 7 votes to approve this item. Seeing no further questions, we proceed by voting.
All right, you're good. Moving fast, we gotta work together.
No, he's not. He left.
We have 10 yes.
10 having voting yes, the motion passes. Clerk, would read the next item.
B is a public hearing on the advisability of establishing a community improvement district at Southwest 17 and Southwest Wanamaker, and an ordinance introduced by City Manager Brent Trout establishing a community improvement district at Southwest 17th Street and Southwest Wanamaker Road, and levying a CID sales tax of 1% within the CID.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll pass it off to Deputy Manager Gerber in order to move through this project.
Good evening again. We would ask that you open and then continue this hearing. We received just today feedback on our proposed development agreement from the developer. We're confident we can work through the issues with him and his team and have it available for you on May 7th.
We have to open the hearing. Okay, so at this point in time, we open the public hearing. Anybody that would like to make statements with regards to this issue has an opportunity to do so. You're being called once. If you have any comments on this issue. Do you have any comments on this issue? Anybody that would like to speak can do so. And finally, anybody that would like to speak can do so. Seeing nobody interested in speaking onto this issue, the public hearing is closed.
Motion to continue to May 7th.
It's exactly, the motion is to continue to, thank you. Okay. Councilwoman Hiller.
Question only, and we talked about a little bit earlier in terms of getting information at the last minute and not wanting to have that continue. Realistically, if you need a week or so to work with the developer on this, is May 7th too soon? But I mean, if we don't want to get it the Friday before we vote, I'm just trying to make sure that we set enough time for you to do what you need to do.
Councilman Hiller, we've had these discussions with
The developer.
the developer
wants
and
to
his
go.
attorney.
Yep.
We have a call with them later this week. We're confident we can get it to you by the posting deadline for the May 7th meeting.
Okay.
And being that there was a continuance, there's no need to vote, correct?
That's correct, but we do have to move to the ordinance and defer it as well.
Okay. Well, this,
Motion to defer the ordinance until May 7th.
now we have a motion to defer the ordinance. Do we have a second? We have a second by Councilman Emerson. Seeing no questions on this issue, we proceed with voting. This vote would defer the ordinance. Yeah, good.
We have 10 yes.
10 having voting yes, the motion passes. City Clerk, if you could read the next item, please.
F is a public hearing on the advisability of establishing a community improvement district for the Sherwood Crossing Villa West development at 29th and Wanamaker, and an ordinance introduced by City Manager Brent Trout establishing a community improvement district for the Sherwood Crossing Villa West development at 29th and Wanamaker, and levying a CID sales tax of 1% within the CID.
Deputy City Manager.
Madam Mayor, thank you. We're asking that you open this hearing and then continue it until June 18th. The developer and his engineer and his team had some miscommunication and didn't meet some deadlines, and so we're asking for a June 18th continuance.
Nice extension. So at this point in time, we have a public hearing that we have to open for the continuance of this package. We have anybody that's interested in speaking, they can come forward. If anybody is interested in speaking on this item, they can come forward. For the third time, if anybody is interested in speaking in this item, they can come forward. Seeing nobody,
Motion continued to June 18th.
it is continued, and now we have a motion to defer the ordinance for June 18th.
Second?
We have a second as well. Councilwoman Heller.
Question on that one, too. This is a combination SID and TIF. And so with the idea of June 18th, is that because they're both going to come forward together?
Councilwoman, that's correct, and we'll have had a planning commission review by then. That's the date that they were not going to be able to work towards.
Okay, because the development agreement, even if there are twin development agreements, they're interrelated, so it makes sense to me that we go together or close to it.
We're negotiating one development agreement for the SID and the TIF, right?
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no further comments, we proceed with this vote. The vote would defer the ordinance to June 18th. To continue the ordinance for the Villa West.
We have 10 yes.
10 having voting yes, the motion passes. We now move on to the non-action items. City Manager, if the clerk would read.
A is discussion regarding the City of Topeka Personnel Code relating to employee residency requirements.
City Manager.
We had a discussion on a few things in the past related to our residency requirement. In order to follow the process that we typically do before bringing back an item for action, I'm bringing it back tonight as a non-action item to receive any questions or comments related to what's been proposed with regards to the resolution and regarding the residency requirement. So really just an opener related to it. If you have questions or issues that you'd like to bring up, I'll take those tonight with the intent that we would bring this back on May 7th in order to make a decision related to this. If you have items that you would propose as alternatives, I would be interested in hearing them related to this ordinance. So I guess at that point, we'd be able to try and move forward in order to get a resolution to this for those individuals that are affected by this, that need to receive notice if we're going to keep our residency requirement the same so that we can begin that process.
Thank you very much. We do have two individuals. One of them has left, signed up for public comment. Mr. Vidal Campos, if you could please approach the podium.
Hello, everyone. Well, thank you for having me up here, and I know it's kind of late, so I'll try to make it short. So I am the current recruiting and hiring sergeant right now for the Topeka Police Department, and right now we're just trying to see what we can do different to get more applicants through the door. I can tell you that back in 2003 when I got hired on, it was almost 400 applicants that applied just to fill in 6 positions. Since then, our numbers have dwindled down to about, if we average maybe 60, that's about average right now. It's not that we don't have qualified applicants here in Topeka, because we do, but those qualified applicants that do live in Topeka are already working for us. So now we have to look somewhere else. Just currently, for this hiring process that I had going on for the May Academy, 6 people dropped out of the hiring process, and those 6 individuals said this was because of the residency policy. Not because they don't want to work for us, it's just that they just don't want to move. I can tell you that one of the individuals that I did talk to, and not this current hiring process, but from the last one, this individual was in the military, was getting out 8 years of service, and his wife had a pretty good job in Manhattan. She was actually willing to budge and actually move halfway to Wamego just to allow her husband to work here. You know, she had already said, look, I've dealt with him missing Christmases, birthdays, our kids' first birth, anniversaries, which I believe is very important. And she was just, all she wanted to do is, can we budge and maybe live in Manhattan while he works here in Topeka and I still keep a job in Manhattan? I had to tell that individual no, just because we just don't have that luxury and they have to live here. So, and that's just one individual. I can tell you that our numbers are growing, but we have to keep looking outside. I can tell you that this academy right now, I know that people are always asking, can we diversify our department? Can we get more minorities through the door? And the answer is yes. I can tell you that the next academy, half are minorities. Half. I can tell you that no other agency in the Midwest can do that, but we are. You know, but this is just one more obstacle that you guys are putting in front of us, and we can't bump up those numbers. You know what I'm saying? So the only thing that I ask is that you guys even consider it. I know it's probably not the right time to vote for this, but the only thing is that I'm asking is just consider it. We've changed a lot of things in our hiring process. I can tell you that the chief worked very hard to try to hire people at least 90 days before the academy started. I can tell you that people were leaving because of that, because they didn't want to wait for that final offer. So that was one big boost. But still, even only 60 individuals applying versus the 400 that we used to have back in the years, the numbers are just not there. And this is just one more obstacle that's in the way. I can tell you that I just recently came back from Haskell University, which is an all-Native American school. I can tell you that one of the biggest issues was the residency policy. They want to work for the city, they just don't want to leave the reservation. So are we discriminating against that specific group of people? I say yes. I want to say no because we're the city of Topeka and this is the capital, and that we want to bring more minorities into the city. But that is one big obstacle for them, is the residency policy. And that's just one issue versus many other things that people don't want to move here. It had nothing to do that they don't want to live within the city.
Mr. Campos, do you need additional time? Your time has expired.
You know what? I think I'm good. I think I made my point, and I've taken more of your time. So thank you.
Councilman Jensen.
I have a question for you, sir.
Sure.
I do have a question for you, sir. Is the bulk of your frustration in hiring, is it just the entry-level academy positions, or is it all throughout the force?
I can tell you that in the last, and these are just numbers, all right, sir, in the last 5 years, and I can't give you the total numbers of applicants that have came in through the door, but they're pretty close to 75. Out of those 75, at least half have already left. All right, I can tell you half of those have left because their spouse is probably making more money than they are. When I took this job, it has nothing to do with money, sir. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
I do it because I want to serve the public. That is why I do my job. I can tell you that the individual that his spouse was willing to move to Wamego, he went to a different agency to make less money. Again, has nothing to do with money. Just trying to make that happy medium, that happy balance. That's all we're asking for. We have done some changes in our hiring process. We've streamlined the hiring process from 30 months to 9 months to 10 to 12 weeks, which is a lot better. We're hiring now people up to 90 days before the academy starts. The pay is actually nice. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we're now actually working 5 on, 3 off, and 4 on, 4 off. Pretty close to being a firefighter. but not close, you know what I'm saying? But pretty close, but we just have better toys, right? So what I'm saying is, we're getting there and we're attracting the people.
Sure.
Just the numbers are not there.
But the biggest time you run into the residence requirement is with the recruits going into the academy.
That is correct.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. All right. Thank you for your comments. I appreciate that.
Councilman Padilla?
Thank you, Mayor. Sergeant, thank you for coming up and giving us your comments. Before I compliment the agency and yourself on the things that you have done, is it fair to say that across the country, residency requirement is not the issue in most cases? It's just difficult to find people who want to be police officers because of the dangerous job that you do?
That is one of the main issues. But I can tell you that nationwide, every department is having problems getting people in through the door. So if we do find a qualified applicant that want to work for us, but we can't get them through the door because one of the issues is residency, why can't we change it? Is what I'm asking. We don't have to, you know what I'm saying? But at least entertain the idea. That's just one more obstacle to put in front of that person to come work in law enforcement agencies. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, thank you. And to go on, like I said, I'm aware of some of the innovative things that the chief has put into place, and your commitment, and also that of Sergeant Salamanca, in trying to recruit differently rather than the standard put an ad in the paper or just go to the job fairs, because that doesn't work anymore.
That is correct.
You have to be more creative than that. I think I spoke with you once about a trip that you made to, is it Mississippi?
Mississippi, sir.
Could you tell me a little bit about that experience?
Sure. As a matter of fact, our last testing that we had was in Mississippi, Hattiesburg, Mississippi. It was at the University of Southern Mississippi. We took the test to them. So that's one of the things that we have been doing, is taking the test on the road. So we do the written test and the physical test on there. As a matter of fact, we're bringing 6 interns back to Topeka, and then eventually they're going to apply with us. I got 2 people from Mississippi right now that graduate in May and are in the hiring process right now. I mean, so I am attracting people to come move to Topeka, but again, the numbers aren't as high as I wish they were. So.
Thank you, Sergeant.
Yep.
Thank you. Councilwoman Heller.
You may have in part answered my question, but I think you were at some of our committee hearings when we talked about this. And a concern, probably the only concern that I had about opening this up, was that we really have wanted to diversify our workforce throughout the police department and all the other departments as well. And I didn't want dropping the residency requirement to have everybody go, well, now we got plenty of people anyway, we don't need to make those affirmative recruiting efforts at the level that they were. Do you see any change? I mean, you're in the police department, there'd be citywide as well.
I don't think the changes is going to, this is the way I see it. I think if the more obstacles there are in front of people to come work for us, the harder it's going to be. That's all I'm saying. I think by opening doors and giving those people the opportunity to come work for us, I think they'll come and eventually even move here. It doesn't mean that they're going to pick up and go. You know what I'm saying? Because people do want to come here and work for us. So
you don't see this as us at risk of losing momentum in the affirmative recruiting that
we can never stop the momentum. We have to continue that momentum. I mean, we have to. The aggressiveness as the way I'm doing recruiting right now, I have to keep that up. If I slow down, we're always going to be behind the curve.
I love that you're going to Mississippi. We talked about that in those hearings, about just targeting the recruiting.
As a matter of fact, on Friday, I go back to Jefferson City, which going back to Lincoln University, which is an all-black school. Okay. I'm going to drive applicants to Topeka, have them test, and then drive them back so that they're not wasting their gas to come down here.
Awesome.
So I'm bringing applicants here for Saturday's test on April 20th.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sergeant Campos. Okay, well, at this point in time, what are the additional comments or questions that you would have for staff or any further discussion on this discussion item? This item is not for vote tonight. Yes. So seeing no further discussion at this point in time, we move on from this item on to the next. And at this point, the next item is announcements. No preliminary, city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. The only two items I have, celebrations coming. We will have 5 new firefighters that have completed the academy, starting their work on the streets on this Saturday. So we're excited to have 5 new firefighters joining our ranks full-time. Also, Thursday is the graduation of the 56th recruit class of the Topeka Police Department. Should be graduating 13 officers that night. So that'll be Thursday night. It's at the at Stormont Vale in their auditorium. So those are the only 2 announcements I have.
I have a few things. First of all, to all the families in Paris and all of the French families that we have here that are struggling with the loss of significant portions of Notre Dame, I want to say that our hearts are with you here from the city of Topeka, even though we're far apart. We suffer your grief with you. The other thing was that at the same time that this happened, Al-Aqsa, which is one of the most important meccas of prayer for the Islamic religion, was also at the same time catching fire. So it was a pretty devastating evening. Wanted to let everybody know that the State of the Community event that's happening this Thursday for lunch, if you haven't gotten your tickets, you are in trouble because they're all sold out. And that is going to be the day that we get the information on what our new flag is going to be. I do know that there was a participation of over 4,000 people that voted for the new flag. And I haven't been told which flag it is, but I have been told that it was a 71% approval rate of all the people that voted. So it's not like we had people saying, we really want this flag. So it was very clear that the flag that won was the flag that was supposed to win. I just got back from Harvard for being in 2 conferences and from doing something pretty awesome. One of those things was speaking to some of those students. They were asking, why does a mayor in the Midwest travel and do so many conferences? And I said, the Midwest has one of the challenges that very few communities have on the coast. In the coast, you have very wealthy individuals with huge corporations that are able to give a lot of money into these municipalities, and you start seeing big economic development happen. And you have donors, and you have huge foundations that are able to really sustain that. But the magic of the Midwest is that you have the conversations that we had today. And we sit down and we wrestle with a budget when we're tired, when we're hungry, when we're sleepy. And we just keep on going because we understand that every single dollar that we have is coming from our constituents, from our kids that are going to be paying for things in the future. And one of the reasons that I like to go out there and represent Topeka is so that people know how amazing our community is. And one of the students at Harvard said, thank you for doing that, because I would have never considered Topeka as a great place to look into. And I am inspired by the things that you guys are doing over there. So you guys are all inspiring students at Harvard. So thank you for doing what you do. Speaking of inspiring students at Harvard, we pretty soon are going to have our fellow for Momentum 2022. And his name is Rodrigo Dorador. He was a data analyst for the Be a Leader Foundation. He speaks Spanish and English. He focuses on storytelling. He was an organizer in LA, and he's doing a master's in public administration with a focus on international development at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard. He's going to be with us staying in Topeka for the summer. So I thought that would be interesting for all of us to know. Then the other thing that I was going to say to Mr. Peak, Dr. Peak, several emails coming in, people telling me how happy they are about our process going back and refilling the potholes, telling me that they're impressed. They look at the trucks and they get excited, and next thing you know, the potholes are filled. So things are not perfect right now, but as the community can see, we're really working to put a pin on that. For all of you that are watching, especially the staff and for the council, every year the mayor gets a chance to stand up and speak about the successes of a community, and in the State of the Community address. I want all of you guys to let me know things that you really want me to highlight, and I'll check it out with the list that I have. I currently gave my list to the city manager, but when I stand up there, I'm not speaking for myself. I'm speaking for all of us. So I want to make sure that if you guys have anything that you really want me to highlight on Thursday when I'm speaking to the community, let me know, because I want your voices to be heard. This is a we thing, not an I thing. And finally, and I'll shut up, I just want to say thank you to all of you. Councilwoman Hiller, for your work and digging into the numbers. Our staff is amazing because they are constantly working, not with one person, which is their boss, but they have the minds to leverage of all of us on the council. And it has been a grueling process to get to where we got today, but it's a good process, and we had great discussion, and it just shows the level of care that we have for our community. And we are one team. It's not staff and body, it's one team. And I love the fact that we are one team. We may not always agree, but we are one team. And that's what makes this city do as amazing as it's doing. So, Deputy Mayor.
First, I wanted to say to Brendan, I'm really sad to hear about the lemur. That was really sad news.
Yes.
I participated in the communities and schools. Did you do that with the financial? No. Okay, it's a financial teaching where they have different booths, and they're given, like, they're married, they're divorced, they have 5 kids, and they have to go around and they have a budget. And I was in the charitable giving booth, which most of the guys said, no, I'm not going to you. And I said, well, you know, there's different ways to give them money. You can do your time, you can donate things. And that really opened some eyes, but that was enjoyable to do that. North Rock Baptist Temple at 2322 Northeast Laurent is having the Doucette family come in. They're a bluegrass gospel family from Texas, and they'll be there Wednesday through Saturday night at 7, and then all 3 services on Sunday. And I think they were here before, and I've heard them, and they're pretty awesome, pretty fun. Going to the Partners in Arts Luncheon tomorrow. I happened to meet a kiddo, I say he's a kiddo, probably 25, that just moved here from Lawrence. And I said, I'm going to ask you some questions. And so he said he really likes Topeka because Lawrence is more of a mom and pop. And he goes, you come here, I hadn't heard this. He goes, but when I come there, the stores that I'm used to in Kansas City are in Topeka, where they're not in Lawrence. And so he goes, my girlfriend moved here, and he goes, I'm really liking it. And I go, you know, what's going to keep you here? He goes, you know, I'm not looking past today. You know, I don't know what can keep me here because I don't know where I'll be in 5 years. But that was interesting. And then I met someone today that said, the one thing I like about our leadership today is they are listening to the community. They really want to hear what the community has to say. And I thought that was pretty cool too. But happy Easter, because I don't think we'll see anybody till then. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Councilwoman Ortiz. Councilman Emerson.
Happy Easter as well.
Councilman Padilla.
Just quickly, I attended the SPCP forum with Councilwoman Ortiz for her district, and I want to compliment the chief and his staff for showing up. Although the attendance was sparse, I think there was a good conversation, a good exchange of ideas. District 4 is up next.
May 20th, I believe.
I would encourage people to come to those forums because I think that there's a real good opportunity to express yourself and not feel intimidated and feel that you're really being listened to. So as we continue through those forums throughout the districts, I would ask all of our council members to encourage the constituents to show up. They don't have to stay through the whole thing, to stay as long as they need to. But I enjoyed going, and I appreciate the opportunity to participate. And happy Easter as well.
Councilman Jensen?
So I will also echo the Happy Easter comment. And I want to send a special shout out to Gina Millsap from the library. The other day, we took Hunter in there to see the library for the first time, and Gina had some really interesting books that are aimed at infants. And so she gave Hunter the books, and then it had to explain to me how they work. They don't have on-off switches, and they don't take batteries, which is this wild novelty. But it was really interesting, you know, I'm learning how to read to kids, and that's a whole different style. But the fact that she had books for him at 2 months old that were, you know, they have this interesting color scheme that their eyes can focus on and see. And it's really fascinating to learn a whole new science of reading and getting reconnected to, you know, I always knew the library was a great place, and it is, but it's fascinating to see it connecting through somebody else's eyes. So that was a really interesting experience for me, and I want to send a special shout out to her for introducing me to that from a different set of people.
Councilman Mays.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, we do have a great library. I've spent a lot of time there with my kids as well. It's a pretty remarkable place. Just want to remind everybody the St. Jude Dream Home tickets are on sale now. They're gonna sell out. So if $100, buy a ticket, and if you're lucky enough, you might get to move to District 7. Yeah, of course I bought.
Councilman Cohen.
Thank you, Mayor. I bought a ticket for the last one, and I didn't win. Unfortunately. I passed out something, everybody, if you can see this. Ronald McDonald House has a kind of a soft place in our heart. We had a sick kid, and we still have a sick kid, but it's under control now. But when we weren't really sure what was going on, we ended up spending a lot of time at Children's Mercy and spent time at the Ronald McDonald House there. And you know, you always see Ronald McDonald House, and you don't really know exactly what they do. And they help families stay close to their kids while their kids are in the hospital. And I had no idea. You know, you always see that. And so for the last several years, we've been helping them out. And they're having a cookie hop bake sale this Friday at 7:30, and I'll be a cashier, so I hope to see you guys bright. I'm on first shift, so I hope to see you all bright and early in the morning over there. It's a great fundraiser for the Ronald McDonald House. All the money does stay here at our local house to help keep families close. So, thanks.
Councilman Lesser. Councilwoman Heller.
2 things. One, thanks to the council and everyone that's worked on the CIP and CIB, and hopefully Councilman Emerson, it was your dream come true. It was Councilman Emerson who pushed for more time on the capital budget, and so you got it.
Yeah, sorry, everyone.
And second, just want to encourage you, you've heard me talk, I think all of you, about the Brown v. Board 65th that is coming up in May. It's the 65th anniversary itself on May 17th. There is 10 days of recognition coming up, kind of bookended by 2 symposia, one on the 10th of May and one on the 17th. We have Carlton Waterhouse from Howard University as a keynoter on the 10th, and lots of testimony from people who were children in the black elementary schools at the time of the Brown v. Board decision. Bookended by a symposium on the 17th, which will be, our keynoter will be Reuben West, who's a national and internationally acclaimed speaker, but is from Topeka. Will be coming back home to help keynote that day, and that day will be focused on people of all walks of life telling their stories and talking about whether we want to move together as a community toward advancing the original agenda of Brown v. Board, it having been 65 years, an entire lifetime. I will push out, there's it's been out on media, so some of you are aware of it. I think there'll be a push, I think by the end of this week, and I'll send you all a copy of that release. But there are bus tours for arts and murals. There are bus tours that graduation weekend for the Brown v. Board story itself. Oral histories, an exhibit at the Mulvane, a film festival at the Jayhawk Theater. KTWU will be debuting a new 60-minute documentary about the plaintiffs that we've done just not even a month ago here in Topeka. So there are going to be all sorts of exciting announcements during the day as well as in the evening. There'll be an evening celebration on Friday evening the 17th at the outdoor Brown v. Board mural that will be multicultural, multi-generational, and I just encourage everybody to kind of lock that 10 days and watch for the opportunities, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
We need a motion to extend at this point in time because we do have an executive session. Councilman Jensen?
Motion to extend.
We have a motion for extension, a second by Councilman Emerson. Seeing no further comments, please proceed by voting.
We have 10 yes.
10 having voting yes, this extends the meeting past the 10 o'clock threshold so that we can continue having our executive sessions. There is one executive session called by staff, if the staff could read the parameters.
The motion is to recess into executive session for a period of time not to exceed 15 minutes to discuss upcoming employer-employee negotiations as justified by KSA 75-4319B3. In order to aid the discussion, the following individuals should be present. Members of the governing body, City Manager Brent Trout, Deputy City Manager Doug Gerber, Administrative and Financial Services Director Jessica Lamondola, Fire Chief Craig Duke, Human Resources Director Jackie Russell, Utilities Director Bob Sample, Deputy Utilities Director Braxton Copley, Deputy Administrative and Financial Services Director Nick Hawkins, Senior Assistant City Attorney Catherine Walter, and myself. No action is anticipated to be taken when the open meeting resumes in the governing body chambers.
We have heard the parameters of the executive session. What is the pleasure of the body? We have a motion by Councilman Emerson, a second by Councilman Jensen. Seeing no additional comments, we proceed by voting to enter the executive session. No action is expected to be taken.
We have 10 yes.
10 having voted yes, the motion passes. We will recess for 5 minutes prior to starting the executive session. Thank you very much.
Completed the executive session with no action taken. Seeing no other business before the council, you are adjourned.
Thank you.